Fox 13 Seattle team to get the latest information. We now know that 3 people are dead after a suspected stalker broke into a Redmond, Washington home and killed a podcaster and her husband.
So what it sounds like to me is that if you are a podcaster... Yo, what up, y'all? It's your boy Rob coming back at you once again with another video. So before we get started, you already know what to do. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit the bell icon twice. Smash the like button, share this video out to all of your followers, and let's get it cracking. All right, so what we have today is the story of a social media pull-up. All right, there was a husband and a wife, and if I'm not mistaken, the wife was somebody who used to broadcast frequently on Clubhouse. Well, what happened? You know how that goes. People are crazy online. People that disagree with you, people that get upset and triggered. One of the things that they like to do that we see all the time is they dig into your personal life and then attempt to put your information out there and then attempt to distance themselves from the responsibility of if something results from it. Something else that we see happen all the time is people yelling at each other like they have absolutely no sense in their head, talking about planning to fight. We're talking about planning to pull up. We're talking about planning to catch a flight. Most times, most of those people don't do that because both parties involved in the situations stand to benefit more from whatever profits it is that they're making on social media to show their entire ass than they would if they were in a casket. But in this situation, some weirdo who happened to be a cross-country trucker decided to stalk the Clubhouse broadcaster. He stalked them to their home and then deleted them and ultimately deleted himself.
Welcome back here on Live Now from that we brought you as breaking news just yesterday. We checked in with our Fox 13 Seattle team to get the latest information. We now know that 3 people are dead after a suspected stalker broke into a Redmond, Washington home and killed a podcaster and her husband.
So what it sounds like to me is that if you are a podcaster, that just makes it that much more difficult to survive the suburbs.
That information from police. The woman's mother survived the attack, escaped, and called 911. The shooting happening at a home on 166th Street Northeast and Northeast 89th Street, if you are familiar with the area, on Friday morning, very early, about 2 a.m. According to Redmond police, officers responded after a woman called 911 at a neighbor's home to report a stalking situation. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a 35-year-old man who lived at the home in the front yard, and he had been fatally shot in the chest. When officers entered that home, they found the man's 33-year-old wife and that suspected stalker both dead after being shot. I do want to play for you our Fox 13 Seattle team's latest story that breaks down the information we have so far.
In the first homicide in the city of Redmond since 2021, a crazed stalker obsessed with a woman killed her and her husband before turning the gun on himself.
This is the absolute worst outcome, for a stalking case.
Police Chief Darrell Lowe says this man, 38-year-old Ramin from Texas, is the suspect. He came to the neighborhood in this red truck Tuesday overnight.
The suspect broke into the home via a bedroom window, that bedroom being the mother's. She did encounter the suspect. She was aware of what was occurring, and she knew or realized that she needed to get out and get help.
Police say the mother of the wife ran for her life to a neighbor's house to call 911. When officers arrived, the mother and neighbor led them to the home.
As officers approached the front of the home, a male later identified as the husband of the victim was seen in the doorway. As officer tried to communicate with him, he collapsed and became unresponsive. Officers evacuated him from the front of the house and realized that he had been shot.
First responders performed CPR, trying to save his life, but he soon died. During the investigation, officers found the man's wife shot in the master bedroom, Ramin dead from shooting himself. The petition for a protection order, filed on March 3rd, says Ramin would leave the woman voicemails more than 10 times a week, sending gifts and flowers to her home, even saying he hired a jazz band to play outside her house for 2 hours, but then called it off. The documents say the suspect would also leave her husband 20 messages a day. He even found her friends' addresses and phone numbers without their permission. Chief Lowe says a restraining order was officially filed with the city's prosecuting attorney's office with a hearing.
Now, this is what this individual did, and he actually was a fan of this female broadcaster. Imagine what these psychos on YouTube who don't like each other do. If you guys know any instances of anybody being psychotic and leaking people's information, make sure that you guys drop it in the comment section.
Scheduled for March 17th.
The restraining order is simply a piece of paper that allows officers to take enforcement action should a suspect violate the court order, but a piece of paper does not protect a person when someone is intent on causing them harm.
Let me ask you guys a question. When content creators and people who watch content online so haphazardly, so carelessly decide to play the information game, do you think something should happen to them? And what do you guys think should happen to them? Because they're putting a person at risk, and in many cases, there's no way to mitigate that risk. So my question is, should there be legal consequences for doxing? If you guys think that there should be, give me a thumbs up and let me know what you guys think that they should be. If you guys don't think that there should be legal consequences for doxing, give me your rationale.
Chief Lowe says it was challenging serving the order to Ramin because he was a long-haul truck driver, always traveling the country for work.
It was difficult to, I'll say, pin him down to a location. It wasn't as though he was local and we had a local address to where we could either do surveillance or find him, serve the protective order, etc. He was in a different state, traveled across the country as part of his employment. So that was the biggest challenge.
Chief Lowe says the woman and her family worked very closely with detectives since becoming aware of the crazed stalking situation in December 2022, even adding extra surveillance cameras to the home.
In this case, the victim did everything that they possibly could. Unfortunately, this person, broke into their home and killed her. And it is a tragic event.
Frankie Thompson, Fox 13 News.
Thank you so much to our Fox 13 Seattle team for breaking down the very disturbing details that we have learned here. You heard that according to the protection order against that shooter, the woman met him in June of last year, and the constant and harassing messages and calls started shortly after that. The order does claim that he would leave several messages a day and a week and would contact friends of the woman. He also was able to obtain her address and the addresses of her friends, despite never being told about them. Several times he threatened to burn himself, they say, outside of her home if she didn't see him. So this brings up a very important topic here. What should you do if you're a victim of stalking? Our Fox 13 Seattle team takes a deep dive.
Here's a better question. What should you do if you're the victim of social media doxing? That's my question.
Into why you should never just ignore it and hope it goes away.
And that means if you feel that something is not right, ask for help. Ignoring it and hoping that it fades away will not work in stalking situations. Confronting a stalker early could potentially save your life.
What's happening with that other person's behavior that's making you feel this way? Why is it inappropriate? Most of the time, we have fear when somebody has violated a social norm.
These are the questions Cheryl Michaels wants you to ask yourself if you think you're dealing with a stalker. She's the director of safety and security at Seattle Pacific University. Michaels says if you find yourself trying to talk yourself out of believing in your gut feeling, consider that a red flag on its own.
The trauma, the fear of what could happen really is a strong motivator to how we respond to it. And often it's to try to ignore it and make it go away. Ignore our feelings, our intuition that is telling us something's wrong here and we need to act.
That act should be reaching out to friends and family, or if it escalates, calling law enforcement. Stalking, by definition, is repeated unwanted attempts at communication.
Now, here's the question. What if it's law enforcement that's stalking you? Then what?
Contact, or even harassment.
And the worst thing we can do is ignore our gut feeling that says, don't answer that call. And after 30 attempts, we're like, okay, if I just answer this phone call after 30 times, then maybe they'll stop. And all that's done is taught the person who's obsessed that all they have to do is be persistent for 30 times. And then eventually they'll get to make that connection.
Michael says once you make a decision not to engage, you need to stick with it. Consistency is crucial with people who display obsessive behavior. If they continue to pursue contact, keep a record of what they're saying, because...
What about the people that obsessively expose themselves online? Because in many cases, there's a lot of these people that tend to obsessively expose themselves online and set themselves up for vulnerable situations to where a stalker could develop an addiction. People should be very careful with how they utilize their online presence. If you guys agree, give me a thumbs up. If you guys disagree, give me a thumbs down.
That often is what makes the contact a crime.
With stalking and the law that's written for stalking, it has to be something that has more criminal intent involved, like threats to damage your property, threats to harm you or a friend. It can't just be the mere phone call or text message, because then we just have harassment.
According to the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, 1 in every 3 women and 1 in every 6 men have been stalked at some point in their lives. Here in King County, we do not have information for 2022 yet, but the latest data available shows that there were 20 civil protection orders issued for stalking in 2021. That is up from just 10 issued in 2020. In the newsroom, Nikki Torres, Fox 13 News.
So what it sounds like is in that particular area, stalking has doubled. Interesting. So what we have now is an article from the New York Times. All right. And this article says stalker fatally shoots audio streamer and husband, police say. So let me ask you guys a question. Do you think that there was any warning signs ignored when it came to this particular case? Do you think that anything could have happened that could have possibly changed this outcome? And if so, what do you think it was? The police in Redmond, Washington said the gunman had been stalking the woman who appeared on an audio stream on the social media app Clubhouse. An audio streamer and her husband were fatally shot in Redmond, Washington early on Friday morning by a fan who had been stalking the woman, the police said. The audio streamer, Zoreh Sadeghi, who is 33, and her husband, Milad Nazari, who is 35, were pronounced dead in a home in Redmond, about 15 miles east of Seattle, around 1:45 a.m. on Friday, said Daryl Love, the Redmond police chief. Miss Sadeghi's mother, who was also in the home at the time, escaped and called the police from a neighbor's house. The gunman, Ramin Kadak Raminazi, a 38-year-old long-haul trucker from Texas, had broken into the home through a bedroom window, Chief Lowe said. Mr. Carter Raminazi, who had been stalking Miss Sadeghi, fatally shot himself after shooting the couple, according to a Redmond Police Department news report. Mr. Kodak Raminazi first discovered Miss Sadeghi after listening to a Farsi audio stream about gaining employment in the tech industry, said the chief at a news conference. The stream was hosted on Clubhouse, a social media app described in a blog by Hootsuite as a cross between podcast and conference call that allows users to talk and listen in chat rooms. It is believed that Mr. Kodak Raminazi was a listener of the audio stream featuring Mrs. Sadeghi and later began communicating with her. They eventually became friends until his actions escalated and she sought a no contact order against him, the police said. They became friends like how? And here's my question. Why would you become friends with somebody on social media if you have a significant other? You know what I'm saying? Like, you can become friends with people, but a woman becoming friends with a man, is everybody sure her husband would be okay with that? Let me ask you guys a question to the women in the comment section. If you have a husband, would your husband be okay with you becoming good friends and casual with a stranger whose number you exchanged, a guy that you met online just out of the clear blue sky, and you guys are having personal access to each other and talking back and forth? Would you guys as husbands be okay with that? Or does your husband have no power and you can just do whatever you want to? Or do you have common sense and said, you know, I just kind of met this guy. I don't know who it is. I'm not really going to be exchanging my information. Which of the three is the situation that we have in here? Okay. According to authorities, Mr. Kota Raminazi had harassed Miss Sadeghi over the phone for months, even calling her more than 100 times in one day. There were instances where the individual did not show up at the location previously bearing gifts. The chief said, referring to Mr. Kodak Raminazi, the items were, I'll say, items of affection, gifts that were mailed to the victim. Mr. Kodak Raminazi once followed Miss Sadeghi to a conference in Denver. near the end of 2022 and visited her home at the night before the shooting, the chief said. Mrs. Sadke contacted the police in January, and the department assigned the case to an investigator, but the police could not easily locate Mr. Kodak Ramanazi. It was not until March that a judge issued a temporary protection order forbidding Mr. Kodak Ramanazi from contacting Mrs. Sadke. The order, however, had not been served as of Friday. Investigators had been attempting to find Mr. Kodak Ramanazi so that the police could arrest him, Chief Lowe said. This is every detective, every chief's worst nightmare, Chief Lowe said. The police were not aware of Mr. Kodak Ramanazi having any criminal history beyond minor traffic offenses. They could also not confirm whether he had obtained his weapon legally. Investigators said he'd rented a vehicle, but it was not immediately clear how he had traveled to the home. What I find fascinating is that this guy had a history of stalking this woman and they couldn't find where he was at, yet he was right outside of the woman's house. If somebody is being stalked and you're the police looking for the stalker, wouldn't you assume that in close proximity of the individual being stalked is where the stalker would be at? Just saying. So let me know what you guys think about this. All right, make sure you guys leave me some comments in the comment section, and remember, if you're on social media, you happen to be a podcaster, and if you give your information to people that you meet on the internet, it just makes it that much harder to survive the suburbs. Peace.